The wind never stopped whispering across the Nebraska plains, even in the hours before sunrise when the horizon was nothing more than a gray bruise against the fading night. Sergeant Eli Carter sat hunched over the battered military transmitter inside Station Echo 12, a forgotten checkpoint 30 miles from the makeshift front. The year was 2037, and America was no longer fighting overseas. This war, the homeland conflict, was being waged squarely on its own soil. The radio crackled with bursts of static that sounded almost alive, like some restless ghost clawing at the wire. Eli adjusted the frequency with a gloved hand, the dials stiff from cold and grit. Each click echoed in the hollow shelter built out of sandbags and corrugated steel. The heating unit had long since given up. His breath fogged the air, drifting like smoke. "Command, this is Echo 12, he said into the mic, his voice low but resolute. "Reading you on Channel 3. Copy that last directive." Nothing came back but hiss and pop. Eli rubbed his thumb along the insignia stitched on his right sleeve, the faded wings of the 7th Signal Division. Communications had always been his lifeline, the invisible thread that stitched chaos into coherence. Without it, a unit could vanish in hours. "Don't think about that," he told himself. "Just keep the signal alive." Outside the outpost, night surrendered slowly to the kind of daylight that never felt warm. The fields were just a sprawl of cracked clay, broken fences, and the skeletons of farmhouses. Somewhere in the distance, artillery grumbled, that slow rolling thunder that every soldier learned to measure between heartbeats. He poured the last of his coffee from a thermos that had lost its cap weeks ago. It was metallic and bitter, but heat was heat. The receiver chirped suddenly. Eli's muscles tightened. "Echo 12, this is Falcon Base. We read you faintly. Report your status." "Over." Relief cut through the cold like sunlight. He pressed the mic again. "Falcon Base, Carter here. Still operational. Outpost intact, barely. Requesting confirmation of mainline activity. Have the northern batteries moved past Grid Delta?" "Negative," the voice replied through layers of noise. "Enemy movement reported east of your position. Maintain relay until dawn cycle." "Copy that. Standing by." Eli leaned back in the wheeled chair that groaned under his weight. He'd been on rotation for 48 hours straight. The next shift was supposed to relieve him at 0300, but the roads were cratered and mined. Nobody was coming. He knew that, even if the brass didn't say it aloud. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph creased nearly in half. His wife, Lena, and their son Max. The boy looked about 7 when it was taken, a summer day, bright as it gets. The memory stabbed him with quiet violence. He kept it on the desk now, right next to the transmitter switch, as if proximity could bridge distance. Static surged again, irregular, broken, then faint Morse tones appeared in the noise. Eli narrowed his eyes. Not from Falcon Base. The rhythm was wrong. Too slow. He wrote down the code on a scrap of yellow paper. Unit 45D today urgent. His pulse quickened. Unit 45D was 2 counties south and presumed cut off a week ago. If they were alive, then the line through the lowlands was still contested, not fallen. That meant intel was wrong, and someone out there needed help. Unit 45D, this is Echo 12. You're barely coming through. Repeat last transmission. Over. Nothing. He adjusted frequency again. A whisper beneath the static. Survivors? Grid 7. The signal blinked out like a candle, and the air returned to white noise. Eli sat frozen for a beat, listening to the empty band. He could pretend he'd heard nothing, forward the partial intercept, leave it for command. But the desperation in that whispering voice dug under his ribs. He keyed in the encryption sequence manually and opened the outbound channel. Falcon Base, Echo 12 contacting. Possible broadcast from Unit 45D, coordinates probable Grid 7 Alpha. Recommend recon or supply, copy. Falcon's reply took 2 full minutes to arrive. Echo 12, we copy partial. Prioritize defense. Orders remain unchanged. Do not break relay. He sighed. Bureaucracy moved slower than artillery. But a line soldier had duties. He followed, question later. He scribbled 45D? Survivors? In his logbook anyway. Hours slipped past in fragments of coded messages, half of them unreadable. He checked the horizon through a periscope mirror. Dust plumes etched the east. Possibly wind. Possibly movement. At 0830, a single figure crested the ridge, too small for a convoy. Eli grabbed his binos. The glint of a rifle barrel caught the light. Friend or foe, hard to tell through the shimmer of heat. He powered the auxiliary sensor, useless, the battery indicator blinking red. Minutes stretched. Then a shot rang, distant but distinct. The figure dropped. A second round followed, impacting near the same spot. Eli ducked instinctively, though the bullets couldn't reach him from that range. He radioed in. Falcon Base, medical emergency likely at Sector Delta 6. Possible survivor hit. Request drone assist. Negative, came the answer. Airspace compromised. Maintain comms silence unless critical. He slammed his fist lightly on the console. Every rule written to preserve the system, but sometimes the system strangled itself. That night, a storm moved in from the plains. Lightning spiderwebbed above, briefly exposing the scarred landscape. The sound of rain striking metal overhead was deafening. Inside, water leaked through seams onto the radio board, hissing when it met hot circuits. Eli covered the equipment with his field jacket and prayed the static would ease, but it only grew louder. Then he heard it. Not through the headset, but outside. Faint echoes, mechanical, steady. Engines. He killed the lantern and crouched by the firing slit. Shapes moved along the far ditch, 6, maybe 7 men. Not friendlies. No visible flag or beacon transmission. They were spreading in a wide arc, approaching the outpost. Eli reached for the sidearm at his hip. 8 rounds left. He stared at the glowing dial of the transmitter, the only light left in the dark shelter. Command had said hold position. Hold meant stay alive long enough for someone to listen. He keyed the mic again, voice tight with control. Falcon Base, this is Echo 1-2. Possible enemy contact within visual range. Marking Sector East. Request immediate coordinates for fallback. Over. Silence. Then a burst of static that might have been speech, might have been nothing. Eli eyed the shadowed doorway. The sound of boots crunching wet soil drifted closer. He whispered into the mic. Still transmitting. Still here. The rain thickened into needles that carved through the night. Every drop smashed against the roof of the bunker like a drumbeat counting down something Eli didn't want named. He crouched behind the sandbag wall, his earpiece pressed in tight. Outside, those moving shadows were growing clearer, dark silhouettes shifting with intention. Whoever they were, they knew the station was occupied. He thought briefly about cutting power to the beacon light that marked Echo 1-2 on friendly maps, but that would also kill the radio. The radio was everything. Abandoning it was not an option. He reached for the field transmitter's portable mic cord and drew it closer, looping it around his wrist so he could talk without lifting his head. Falcon Base, this is Echo 1-2. Confirm contact at Grid Delta 9. Hostiles approaching, estimate half dozen. Preparing for defensive engagement. Over. Static swallowed his words. The sound of the storm masked footsteps for only a heartbeat longer, then there was the unmistakable scrape of metal against concrete. Someone testing the door latch. Eli gripped his M9, thumb flicking off the safety. He steadied his breathing, counting silently. 3. A thud. Then another. The door shuddered inward under the blows. He fired once through the gap. The shot cracked like thunder, amplified by the close walls. A figure stumbled back outside, cursing in a language Eli didn't recognize. The rain almost drowned the scream. He dove to the radio. Echo 1-2 engaged. Repeat, engaged. Requesting immediate support. Nothing. He switched frequency to a local relay. Any unit reading, this is Sergeant Carter at Echo 1-2, taking live fire, coordinates. The window shattered above him before he finished. Shards fell across the radio in a glittering rain of glass. He dropped low again, crawling under the table, careful not to step on the fragile photo beside the mic. He could feel the tremor in the floor every time a shell hit within half a mile, muffled explosions rippling under the thunder. They weren't using heavy artillery yet. This felt like a test, a probing strike before something larger. Probably mercenaries sent ahead of a main force. The idea of capture flickered through his mind. He shook it off. Signalmen didn't surrender. They held until the last wave passed, or until the command line broke. The latch gave way. Rain and mud poured in as the first shape entered, backlit by lightning. Eli fired twice without aiming. The silhouette dropped, tangled in the threshold. Another figure stumbled over him. Eli flung the chair aside and fired again. The hammer clicked empty. He retreated to the inner alcove behind the radio rack, reloading with trembling fingers. Drops of rain hissed when they met the hot receiver tubes. The metallic smell of ozone filled the bunker. He turned the volume down halfway and listened. Muffled talking. Then, silence. They were repositioning. A whisper crackled in his earpiece, startling him. Echo 1-2, do you copy? The voice was thin, female, and unfamiliar. Eli keyed the mic with blood still ringing in his ears. Echo 1-2 active. Identify. Unit 7, relay patrol out of Lincoln Sector. We caught your ping. Are you under fire, Sergeant? Relief burst through him so suddenly it almost hurt. Affirmative. Multiple unknown contact. Station breached but holding. Grid Delta 9. Do not approach heavy, they've got mines. The comm cut suddenly to white noise. Then nothing. He stared at the console, disbelief mounting. The interference spiked not from the storm, but from inside. A high-frequency jammer. The attackers had won. Eli slammed his fist against the desk. You've got to be kidding me. He looked over the equipment rack. One field transmitter, one manual generator, one backup capacitor. No counter-jamming gear. He was blind. Thunder rolled again, closer now, shaking dust from the ceiling beams. He thought of his son Max, who used to love storms, would run outside to watch lightning fork over the plains. It's like the sky taking pictures, the boy once said. For a moment, Eli almost smiled. Focus, soldier. He crawled toward the fallen man at the doorway. The body was slumped, motionless. Civilian boots, mismatched gear, another mercenary outfit, nothing official. He stripped the weapon, a carbine with 3 loaded mags, and dragged the corpse aside long enough to kick the door shut. The wet smell of blood mixed with diesel. Still transmitting, he muttered, half to reassure himself. He powered up the short-range booster even though the storm made it useless. Hours bled into each other. The rain never stopped. Once, he thought he saw movement in the far field again, but it could have been the wind twisting through broken fences. His body demanded rest, but adrenaline refused. Around 0200, the power died for good. The main generator sputtered, choked, and quit. The room plunged into black. In the silence that followed, he heard something new, a voice, faint and close. Sergeant Carter. His name, spoken clearly, not from the radio. He froze. Every hair on his neck stiffened. Sergeant Carter, the voice repeated softly. We know you're alive in there. Surrender the transmitter. You don't have to die for a deadline. He traced the sound. It came from just outside the main door, maybe 10 feet away. Perfect English, calm, almost polite. The kind of voice that meant confidence backed by numbers. Eli steadied his breathing, wiped rain off his eyes with the back of his sleeve, and answered through the cracked doorway. That's funny, fella. This line still got heartbeat enough to fight you with. Silence followed, then the crunch of boots retreating. A few seconds later, a dull thunk, metal scraping concrete. He knew that sound too well. They'd left something. He dived under the operating desk a second before detonation. The concussive blast tore through the entrance, flinging shards of sandbags and steel inward. Pressure hit his chest like a giant's fist. The world became noise and light and grit. When he resurfaced through the ringing, air tasted like cordite. He coughed, ears bleeding, but the radios, miraculously, still hummed faintly. A few indicator lights blinked, stubborn against annihilation. He pulled himself upright, limping. The shelter was half collapsed, water pouring through the torn roof. But Echo 1-2 was still alive, and so was he. He pressed his headset back on, swallowing blood. Falcon Base, his voice cracked, nearly gone. This is Echo 1-2, station breached but operational. Hostiles repelled. But I am still transmitting. This time, against all odds, a reply came, faint but clear. Copy, Echo 1-2. Hold out. Reinforcements moving west. ETA 6 hours. Stay on the air. 6 hours. Eli looked around at the ruin of his post, the door hanging by a hinge, rain drenching the floor, pieces of metal glowing red-hot. He checked his watch, 2:40. 6 hours might as well be forever. He switched the transmitter to loop mode and leaned back, exhaustion pressing down. His eyes stung from smoke and rain, but he forced them open. The hum of the machine was a heartbeat he couldn't afford to lose. Outside, the storm began to ease, traded now for distant artillery somewhere on the southern ridge. The sky flickered pale, a trembling false dawn. Eli gripped the mic once more. Still transmitting, he whispered again, more to himself than to command. Still here. When morning finally broke, it came pale and uncertain, like the world had forgotten how to invent color. The rain thinned into a mist that clung to everything. The sandbags, the twisted antenna tower, the shattered door of Echo 1-2. Eli Carter blinked against the gray light and felt the stiffness of exhaustion in every joint. He hadn't slept in more than 2 days. His uniform was soaked stiff with mud and dried blood. The radio was still humming, faintly, the old circuits glowing dull amber. Against all odds, it kept working. Falcon Base, this is Echo 1-2, confirming survival, he said, voice raw. Damage significant, broadcast capacity down 40%. Awaiting instructions. Silence followed. Then a pop, and the channel filled with static so thick it felt alive. Fixing it meant going outside. He pocketed a toolkit, tightened his jacket, and stepped through the jagged opening where the door used to be. The air smelled of wet soil and electric ash. The plains stretched out pale and silent all the way to the horizon. No movement, no birds, just smoke rising thinly from where last night's shell had hit. He moved quickly but low, scanning the ground. His boots sank into mud that sucked greedily at every step. The generator hut at the rear of the post still stood. Its steel doors were warped from the blast, but the lock gave when he kicked it. Inside, the backup fuel drums were intact and empty. He ran his hand along the wall, feeling the faded stencil that read Property U.S. Signal Corps. The irony made him smile weakly. The Corps hadn't existed as an organized branch in years. It was just a name spray-painted on whatever shelter still had a transmitter. He pried open a maintenance drawer. Worn fuses. Paracord. A field battery. Enough to jury-rig something. Eli worked in silence, slicing cable insulation with his knife, connecting what remained of the main coupler to the mini battery. When current began to glow faintly against the damp air, he let out a shaky breath. Not perfect, but enough for power. Then something caught his attention. A trail of footprints behind the shed, half erased by rain. Not his. He crouched, tracing them with a fingertip. Smaller boots, lighter step, maybe a scout. They led away toward the broken fence line at the eastern edge of the post. He followed for 30 yards before spotting what had left them. A figure slumped against the collapsed fence, wrapped in a torn poncho. The face was obscured by mud and shadow. For a heartbeat, Eli thought it might be one of last night's attackers. But then the person groaned softly. He froze, weapon ready. Identify yourself. No answer but a pained exhale. He stepped closer, gun steady. The figure was a woman, young, late 20s maybe. Her sleeve bore a faded patch, Unit 45D Recon Division. His pulse kicked up. He knelt beside her, checking for wounds. A fragment cut ran along her left side, bleeding but not deep. She stirred, voice rough. Radio, are you? Echo 1-2. Yes, he said quickly. Name, soldier. Private Juno Wells. 45 Delta. We sent a call, days ago, didn't think anyone heard. Eli nodded grimly. Heard. Barely. She stared at him through rain-stung eyes. Everyone's gone. Our convoy got trapped near the reservoir. We moved north, but they followed. They. Contractors. Paid guns. Not national. They wore no colors. She coughed, pain flickering across her face. They wanted the relay zones. They said whoever controlled comms would own Nebraska. Eli handed her his canteen. Drink slowly. She drank, trembling. I can get you inside, he said. We've got partial power, medical kit, heat if the generator holds. Juno looked at the sky reluctantly. You shouldn't have stayed here. Orders, he said. Somebody has to keep talking. He helped her up, one arm over his shoulder. She was lighter than she looked, bones sharp under the soaked uniform. Together they stumbled back toward the bunker. Inside, the radio's tone had flattened to a low hum. Eli retuned it, adjusting for the new power source. The console lights flickered weakly, then steadied. Falcon Base, Echo 1-2. Have located survivor, Private Wells, 45D. Request evac patch coordinates. Over. The response came slower this time, voice distant and halting. Echo 1-2. Falcon here, seek, negative. Area under siege. Secure civilian, maintain post. The line died again. Eli closed his eyes. Copy that, he whispered to nobody. Juno slumped against the wall, shivering. You can't hold this place alone. I've been doing it 2 weeks, he said. Guess I'm good at it. She gave a faint smile that didn't last long. You shouldn't have answered that signal. He shrugged. I'm sentimental about lost voices. Lightning flashed through the cracks above, followed by another distant boom. The front was drawing closer. After an hour's work, he patched the ceiling leaks with a torn tarp and checked Juno's wound again. Clean, no infection yet. She'd rest, he'd keep the line alive, and maybe, just maybe, a rescue would happen. Then the static changed color. Not sound exactly, more like a vibration. It carried a whisper, buried deep under the noise. Echo, 12th coordinates, compromised. Eli froze. The voice wasn't Falcon's. Different modulation, distorted. It repeated, Echo 12. Compromised. They're tracing. Move frequencies now. He turned sharply to Juno. Did you hear that? She nodded, eyes wide. That's them. The contractors use signal traps. They'll zero in on any transmission spike. How long before they fix the location? 10 minutes, maybe less. He stared at the mic. If he stopped transmitting, command would lose him. If he kept going, he'd be a beacon for every hostile in 50 miles. Duty against survival, an equation with no right answer. Juno read his hesitation. Sergeant, we can leave the post. The woods west lead to the ridge. If they're moving from the east, we can reach high ground before they arrive. Eli shook his head slowly. No one else is broadcasting within this grid. If I go dark, Falcon loses the network. That's the battlefield blind. I won't be the one to cut the eyes. She clenched her jaw. If you die here, your message dies with you. He didn't answer. He switched out the antenna channel to a narrow beam, harder to jam, weaker range, and keyed the mic. Falcon Base, this is Echo 1-2. Possible compromise confirmed. Shifting to narrow broadcast, code 7. If line goes dead, presume enemy interference. Repeat, do not assume loss of personnel. He switched off the recorder. Outside, clouds churned like black smoke. The air began to tremble again, artillery warming up in the distance. The entire prairie sounded ready to ignite. Juno limped to the doorway, scanning with binoculars. They've got drones. Low altitude. 2 scouts sweeping east to south. Eli felt the old calm settle in. Then we have less than 30 minutes. He stared once more at the microphone glowing faintly on the table. It was more than a machine. It had become his confession booth, his weapon, and his only witness. Let's get ready to move, he said. Juno nodded, clutching the rifle he'd given her. Eli strapped the photo of his family inside his vest pocket, tightening the latch. For a fleeting moment, he thought of Lena and Max, safe maybe somewhere under clearer skies, and whispered, "Stay tuned, kid." Then he slung the backpack radio over his shoulder, checked his sidearm, and glanced one last time at Echo 1-2. The receiver light pulsed once more, steady like a heartbeat. Outside, thunder answered it. By mid-morning the mist had lifted, revealing endless plains scarred by trenches, burned barns, and the gray skeletons of wind turbines that no longer turned. Eli and Juno kept low, moving west along broken fence lines. The makeshift pack radio weighed heavily on his shoulders, every bump reminding him that this was the last active transmitter in the corridor. They hadn't spoken much since leaving Echo 1-2. Wind hissed through the tall weeds, carrying the distant drone of engines. The mercenaries were combing the sector, dragging signal scanners like metallic hounds across the prairie. Each pulse of equipment made Eli's radio flicker faintly, a heartbeat echo of their pursuit. Juno stumbled once, hissing as pain lanced through her stitched-up side. Eli caught her arm. "You good?" "I will be," she said, jaw tight. "How far to that ridge?" 2 miles, maybe 3. After that it's ravine country, good cover." They passed a rust-eaten billboard half buried in mud. The faded lettering read "Welcome to Clay County, home of the Harvest Fair." Someone had shot the sign full of holes. Eli paused, scanning through binoculars. The eastern sky was bruised with movement, tiny specks circling. Drones, 4 of them, glinting like insects in sunlight. He ducked back fast. "They've got air eyes," he whispered. "We'll move along the drainage." The ditch ahead stretched like a scar through the field, half full of stagnant water. They slid down and slogged forward, knee-deep in mud. The air smelled of rust and rain. "Why'd they want the signal posts?" Juno asked after a while, her voice low. "Control the network, control the story," he said. "The front line isn't just guns, it's who can make the rest of the country believe they're winning." She nodded slowly. "My unit thought we were rescuing civilians near the reservoir. Turned out we were bait. Once they triangulated our radio, they hit us in minutes." Eli frowned. "And they left you alive?" She met his eyes. "Maybe they wanted someone to find me." The words sank in. The static inside his headset began to crackle again, faint but timed, like breathing. He adjusted the gain. "Echo 12. A man's voice whispered through the noise. You can run, but the sky'll find you." Eli ripped off the earpiece, anger flaring. Someone was piggybacking his signal with psychological games. He'd seen this before, AI-driven broadcast traps built to mimic command voices until soldiers second-guessed their orders. "Keep moving," he muttered. They reached the ridge by noon. From the top, the landscape fell away into low wooded valleys, dotted with dead farmhouses. Smoke still curled from where Echo 121 stood, just a smudge against the plain. Juno set down her pack and looked back. "You think anyone made it to those reinforcements Falcon promised?" "Doubt it," he said. "But as long as we can transmit, they'll think we did. That means the western grid isn't lost yet." He unfolded the pack antenna and fixed it between 2 metal fence posts. The rig buzzed faintly as it caught a signal. He tested a short burst. "Falcon Base, this is Echo 12, now mobile. Relocating to Grid West 5 Charlie. Confirm receiving." Static. Then, half a syllable, "Cart, a hold, position," before the band drowned again. Juno gave a nervous laugh. "It's like talking to ghosts." "Command's always been ghosts," he said softly. A sudden vibration rolled underfoot, a rhythm too mechanical to be thunder. Eli looked east and saw them. 3 armored personnel carriers grinding across the plain in formation, heading straight for the ridge. Drones circled above like escorts. "Down," he barked. They dropped behind an overturned pickup carcass just as the lead vehicle fired a flare. Dazzling red light bathed the field. "They're sweeping sectors," Eli said. "We can't outrun them." Juno's eyes darted to the radio. "Kill the signal. Now." He hesitated for half a heartbeat. Killing the radio meant losing all link to Falcon, losing every chance to warn others the net was compromised. He flicked a switch and changed to passive mode instead. No outgoing, only listen. "If I cut this, we vanish into nothing," he whispered. "Better nothing than dead." Engines rumbled closer. Dust trailed high. He took a breath, eyes scanning terrain. The slope west dropped into a culvert that led toward a barn. "Move when I say run." A series of whines above, drones deploying spotlights. The ground blazed white. "Now!" They sprinted downslope, splashing through mud as rounds snapped overhead. Within seconds the ridge erupted in gunfire. One bullet nicked his sleeve, another sheared bark from the tree beside him. They reached the barn and dove inside. The roof was half collapsed, the air thick with fertilizer dust. Eli shoved the door closed and crouched behind stacked hay bales. Juno's breathing came fast and shallow. "You hurt?" "Not yet." He peeked through a knothole. "They're fanning out." He checked the radio. Still alive. He turned the dial through frequencies until another voice caught. Female this time, strained but familiar. "Echo 12. Carter, do you read?" He froze. "Falcon?" "Repeat, who is this?" "Falcon base. Reinforcements delayed. Evac window closing. You must preserve the channel, without you we lose West Command." Juno stared at him. "They'll trace you again if you answer." He whispered, "I know," then pressed transmit anyway. "Falcon base, copy. We're pinned at West 5 Charlie. Coordinates burning. Confirm visibility before we go dark." The return voice was a scream, not human. Distorted, metallic, a feedback shriek that tore through the speakers and echoed across the barn. Both flinched. It wasn't Falcon. Eli slammed the power off. Blue sparks leapt from the coil. The device smoked. A second later, bullets tore through the upper wall, splinters rained down. "They've got us marked." Juno shouted. He grabbed her rifle and returned 2 bursts through the door gap. Figures scattered outside. Mooks in black body armor with insignia he didn't recognize. "Back hatch," he yelled. They ran through the rear, jumping into thigh-deep grass as the barn exploded behind them in a roar of fire and dust. The shockwave hurled them forward. When he woke, everything was ringing again. Smoke billowed where the barn had stood. The radio pack lay 10 feet away, surprisingly intact but hot to the touch. Juno crawled toward him, coughing. "Carter!" He sat up, dazed. "Still here." She managed a ragged laugh. "Good. Because we're out of time." Across the field, the armored carriers had halted. Figures dismounted, moving cautiously, rifles ready. Above them, the drones circled tighter, predators orbiting wounded prey. Eli pulled himself to his knees, strapped the radio pack back on, and whispered, "We run west again. Hills'll cover us until sunset." "And after?" she asked. He looked toward the fading daylight streaking across the clouds. "After, we send one last signal." The distant hum of engines grew louder, vibrating through the soil like a coming storm. They rose together and plunged into the high grass, the wreck of the barn burning behind them, sending a column of black smoke that marked their path for miles. Night fell fast and angry. The sky burned for a while behind them, then the plains went black again, endless and wind-torn. Every gust carried sparks from the burning barn like fireflies without music. Eli and Juno trudged westward along a half-collapsed farm road, the radio pack pressing deep grooves into his shoulders. They were down to 1 rifle, a half-charged sidearm, and whatever luck was left. The radio, though, was still alive. Its little indicator light blinked faintly against the darkness. "Keep that thing off," Juno warned. "They're still hunting your frequency." "It's off," he said. "Mostly." Truth was he had rewired the receiver for analog bursts, milliseconds of output too short for any scanner to lock onto but long enough for a heartbeat's worth of sound. Somewhere out there, Falcon Base, or whoever was left of it, might still be listening. They reached a stretch of high ground where the soil turned rocky. A derelict grain silo loomed ahead, broken at the top, its ladder half fallen. It was shelter, barely. Inside, the air reeked of rust and bird droppings. He set the pack down and spread a tarp across the floor. Juno slid to the wall, every movement careful against her healing ribs. For several minutes they simply listened, to the wind rattling sheet metal, to the low hum of a land that used to grow things. Eli turned the radio on low and whispered, "Falcon Base, this is Echo 12. If you can still trace this, we're alive west of Clay County. Signals compromised. Ground ahead lost. Please confirm status." Static answered, long and patient. Then, impossibly, a faint voice spoke, so soft he thought it might be an echo of memory. We hear you, Echo 12. Eli's breath caught. Falcon base. No response. Just crackles, like applause from a faraway crowd. Juno looked at him. You sure that's them? Doesn't matter, he said. It means someone's still out there. She studied him for a moment, exhaustion dulling her eyes. You ever wonder what happens when nobody listens? When the line just ends? He smiled faintly. Then you keep talking until it doesn't. Outside, thunder rolled. Not natural, artillery. He could see the flashes now, a jagged horizon of light where the mercenary column crept closer. Each explosion sent tremors through the earth, knocking dust from the silo walls. He knelt, tightening the antenna coil and redirecting the transmitter's beam toward the sound of the blasts. If they're coming, we'll make it count, he said. Juno blinked. You're seriously going to broadcast while they shell these planes? Yeah. Maybe they track me. But maybe command hears first. Maybe they'll know exactly where the enemy is when the line cuts. That might save 100 others. She reached for his wrist, weak but firm. Then let me stay on the scope. You get the message out. He hesitated, then nodded. Deal. The first shells landed a mile short, throwing up fountains of dirt and fire. The second wave came closer. The air pressure thumped like giant footsteps. Eli felt the shockwave push through his chest. He keyed the mic one last time. Falcon Base, this is Sergeant Eli Carter, Echo 12. Broadcasting live from West Sector under direct engagement. Mark this grid. Repeat, mark this grid as enemy artillery base of operation. Civilians and recon assets compromised. Do not. The blast cut him off mid-sentence. A white wall of sound enveloped everything. He hit the floor before realizing he was falling. Dust rained from above, then the whole upper structure gave way. When he came back to himself, he was lying among twisted beams of the silo. His ears screamed with silence. Where the radio had been, only shards glowed faintly. Juno's voice reached him dimly. She was alive somewhere in the haze, calling his name. He tried to answer, but his throat was raw sand. He crawled toward the debris. The transmitter casing was cracked open like a broken heart, wires tangled, power cell flickering weakly. One light still blinked. He pressed his palm against it as if touch alone could make it speak again. Still transmitting, he whispered. Juno's silhouette appeared through the smoke, crawling too. Her hand found his shoulder. You did it, she said. Whatever you sent, it went through. I saw the signal flare before the roof came down. He smiled through blood on his lips. Then it's worth it. Above them, flares arced across the sky, red and white against the black. Searchlights swept the ground. Armored vehicles were moving in, but so were jets, streaking west to east. Whether friendly or enemy, he couldn't tell. Juno grabbed his collar. We have to move. He tried to rise, but pain pinned him down. The lower half of the silo wall had collapsed across his leg. He looked at her, already knowing. You go. No. Orders, Private. His voice cracked but carried steel. Take the recording disc. Deliver it to Falcon, whatever's left of them. Tears blurred the grime on her face. There's nowhere left to deliver anything. Then make somewhere. She clenched her jaw, reached for the small memory cartridge still wired to the radio's core, and slipped it into her chest pocket. Outside, engines roared closer. Eli leaned back against the splintered metal, eyes drifting upward. Through the hole in the roof he could see the stars, dimmed by smoke but still there. For the first time in years, the sky looked calm. He turned the ruined mic in his hand, thumb brushing the transmit switch that no longer worked. Still, he raised it to his lips. Echo 12, signing off. Juno's hand rested briefly over his. I'll tell them you never stopped talking. He wanted to laugh but couldn't. Instead he nodded once. Then another shell screamed down, and the world turned white again. A second later, all frequencies on the western grid went quiet. For 9 minutes of perfect silence, the war paused, as if the very air listened for his voice that would not return. Then, faintly, from the cracked remains of the field radio half buried in ash, a hiss rose, static shaping itself into a sound no one could mistake. Echo transmitting.